Welcome to tonight's edition of Resource PNG. The presence of gas in PNG has been known for over 25 years, with the first discovery of the Hides gas field in 1987 that had the prime purpose of powering the Porgera gold mine with electricity. But with the construction of the multi-billion kina PNG LNG project, PNG will see large-scale commercialization of liquefied natural gas, with exports expected to commence next year. But just how much foundation knowledge do we really know about the dynamics of the LNG industry? In this segment, Vivek Chandra gives us his expert view of the LNG industry and where PNG fits in the world market. Mr. Chandra, thank you for making time to join us on the show.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
We understand that you were in the country conducting a workshop for the PNG industry and government on the dynamics of the LNG industry. What was the purpose of this workshop?
I think the purpose of the workshop was to try to offer a perspective on where the world markets are going, where the world gas markets are going, where the world LNG markets are going, but also to make sure that the people in the industry concerned, as well as the government, have that essential foundations of knowledge. So once PNG starts exporting LNG, which will be next year, they understand the issues involved, they understand the dynamics of the world market, they understand how prices might be set, to provide them that basic amount of knowledge so PNG can be an active player in the world LNG markets.
Oil and gas have always been closely associated. The two have similar characteristics. However, on the world market, oil has a world price and LNG does not. Yeah. Why is this?
That's one of the toughest questions to answer, because the natural reaction is to feel that gas should have a worldwide market, just like every other commodity, including oil, has a worldwide market. Unfortunately, the biggest problem with gas, as opposed to nearly every other commodity that PNG exports or most other countries exports, is gas is very difficult to transport. Because gas is difficult to transport, you cannot easily move it from one market to the other, and thus the price of the gas tends to be a regional price or a local price. The temptation is to use a price, let's say in America, or the price in Japan, and say that should be the value of your resource here in PNG. Unfortunately, until you do that massive investment to get your gas to those markets, that price is quite irrelevant. Because in the end of the day, if you can't get your gas to the person who's willing to pay for it, there's no real point in having that price even being discussed. So I think that it matters to PNG more once we start exporting, but I think the important thing to realize is you will still export to the local markets to where you export to, which might be Japan or China, whatever the case might be, that the price in the US may not be that relevant to you. So that's one of the issues. But very interesting, and it's a question that a lot of people feel that we are going to start converging to prices. We are going to start seeing a worldwide LNG price or worldwide gas price, but we're definitely not there yet, and I don't think we'll be there for a few more years.
Can you explain the growing role of LNG in the world markets?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the world of LNG, of course, is extremely exciting. It's extremely exciting for PNG after 30 years of talking about this to finally be out there and be part of that really exciting, the dynamic LNG market. The LNG industry has been around for a long time. The first LNG projects were started in the late 60s. And so we've been slowly just building up the market share of LNG. Now, we have to realize that at the end of the day, LNG is purely a way to get natural gas to market. It is not actually modifying the natural gas. So it's part of the natural gas dynamism around the world. Obviously, natural gas is an incredible fuel because of many reasons. The main reasons being it's plentiful. It's being found all over the world. Natural gas is a low-carbon fuel, so it's great for us as we transition to a renewable, low-carbon economy. And natural gas is a very versatile fuel. It can be used in nearly everything that we can use other fuels for. We can make power. We can generate power from natural gas. We can use it for transportation. We can use it to modify and make transportation fuels. We can use it for petrochemicals. There's a variety of uses. So natural gas consumption, natural gas demand has been increasing anyway, especially in our part of the world where we have these very dynamic economies that need more power. And natural gas power is just a very convenient way to generate power. It's clean, it's modular, it's efficient, it's cheap. There's a lot of advantages over it. The fuel may not be cheap, but the equipment is cheaper than other things. So as the natural gas industry is growing, the demand for ways to get natural gas to market are growing. And LNG, after all, is just a way to get natural gas to markets. Just to kind of add, I mean, the natural gas industry is the fastest growing part of the fossil fuel chain, and LNG is the fastest growing portion of that natural gas industry. So LNG is definitely one of the fuels of the future. The number of players involved in the LNG world is increasing dramatically. The number of exporters, the number of buyers are increasing. And really, in this part of the world, nearly every country that has a coastline is either thinking of buying LNG or is buying LNG or thinking of exporting or is exporting. So, great part of the world to be in, and obviously a very exciting industry.
We'll continue the interview right after this break. We've been discussing the dynamics of the LNG industry in order to have a better foundation of knowledge with Vivek Chandra. As we've learned, unlike other commodities, gas does not have a world price because of the difficulty in transporting to markets, which is why it is usually sold at a local or regional price. In this next part of the interview, we find out why the price of gas may drop in the coming years and how PNG will fare with LNG exports once the gas supply in the US increases. In your workshop, you indicated that the world gas price will fall in the coming years. Why is this?
I want to clarify that point. I think in a simplistic way, maybe it will fall, but it's not. There's a few factors at work. I think in my workshop, I stress that I think the next few years are going to be a very tight in the industry. Remember, there is no world gas price. So let's start off from the very beginning. The Asian LNG price. Let's look at that because there is no such thing as a world gas price. The Asian LNG price, I think, is determined by Asian supply and demand characteristics. With the added complication, we have long-term contracts that tend to take away from the dynamic supply and demand interactions. In the near term, I feel that the Asian economies and the new emerging economies, I mean, we're talking about India and China and even Thailand and Vietnam and the Philippines, there's a lot of new consumers of LNG. And the next 2 or 3 years, we don't see a lot of new supply of LNG. So basic economics will tell you that we have a situation where there's more people wanting the gas and there's less supply of gas, or there's a constant supply of gas. Another added complication has been the Japan quake, a very unfortunate event, but it resulted in a massive increase in gas demand because Japan has effectively shut down most of its nuclear power stations. So that was something that we didn't expect to see. The world LNG system was kind of ready to supply to the new demand centers of Asia and China, but they didn't expect the Japan quake to happen. So that has added a bit of tightness to the market. So I think the next few years, we actually see the market tight, the prices might go up a little bit. And so PNG LNG is actually coming at a really interesting time. However, I think in the medium to long term, we have a lot of massive changes in the business. The massive changes, I think, are really related to the US and the North American LNG exports. We can digress a little bit, but the North American LNG exports, I think, are going to be an incredible force. There's an enormous amount of volume that's potentially available. I feel that the US government is in a very difficult situation. It cannot refuse the exports permits. There is an issue about free trade and non-free trade countries, but at the end of the day, the US looks at a balance of trade like every other country, and the US buys a lot of things from Asia. It would love to sell a lot of things to Asia, and nothing better than to sell gas. The US gas industry has had an incredible emergence over the last few years with the advent of the discovery of the production of shale gas. The US now could have the second largest or potentially the largest gas producible reserves in the world. I'd say producible because there's a lot of gas in other countries, but the US has this incredible infrastructure in place that any gas you find, you can put it into a pipeline and get it to market. So because now we are in a situation where the US has more gas supply than the local demand, there's a lot of pressure to actually start exporting that. And where do you want to export to? You want to export to this part of the world, which has the highest prices. So in this situation, we might see 2-3 years from now, a lot of US gas starting to come here. It'll start in 2 or 3 years, but I think the tidal wave is going to be after that as more and more projects, and this becomes a routine balance of trade thing. So by 2017, 2018, 2019, I see a lot of American gas coming to this part of the world. And yes, the economies are growing, but there's more gas than the economies will grow. And I actually see a flat to slightly lowering of prices. So that's why I think that we think in this part of the world, we might actually see a flat or lowering of prices. But in the near term, I think a bit tight. just to kind of finish my answer, I think that the dynamics are very different in different countries, in different regions. Eastern Australia, where I live, we might see actually rising prices because there's a huge amount of gas requirement to feed into the export LNG projects that the coal seam methane gas that they're trying to find, we'll talk more about that later, are not finding the gas they want. And so that's taking in conventional gas. So an Eastern Australian customer is going to see rising gas prices from now on till a long, long time, while an Asian customer will see rising prices for a short time and then maybe a flatten out. So hopefully that answers your question. And of course, in the States, it's anybody's guess. I think LNG prices or gas prices, because it's such a dynamic market, it'll be pretty much flat from here on out. That's all.
Having said that, seeing the US will increase exports, how will this affect the PNG LNG project, seeing that it commences exports next year?
Exactly. No, I think that's a question that every exporter currently in Asia and every future exporter is watching extremely carefully. They're not worried. They have long-term contracts. Their markets are secure. And I think on the superficial level, they're absolutely correct. But I also feel that the LNG business is very much a relationship business. It's a business that you are now agreeing to supply to your customer and getting into a contractual relationship for 20 years, 25 years. It'd be very hard for me to see how the customer will continue to be happy with your supply and the relationship if they are paying a lot more than the price in the marketplace. So I do think there's going to be some downward pressure on PNG LNG. A lot of these contracts have price renewal clauses where every few years the prices are reviewed by the customer and the buyer. I think that in the future, those negotiations are going to be a little bit tougher because the buyers are going to say, hey, I know we agreed on a certain price formula when we decided the PNG LNG project, but the world has dramatically changed. We didn't foresee this incredible US export coming into Asia. We didn't see the new pricing scheme that the US exports are trying to promote. And this pricing scheme is actually quite attractive to us. So let us sit down like good partners and try to negotiate a better deal. There'll be a lot of resistance, of course, from the suppliers. But the suppliers, such as PNG LNG, if they ever build a third train, they're going to depend on these customers again. So it behooves them to respond to their concerns. And definitely when the next contracts come along for the third train and future trains, it's going to make a massive impact. And let's not forget, PNG has one project that is obviously active up the road, and that's going to happen, but there's many more projects waiting in line. The projects that are waiting in line still have not secured these contracts. Those contracts may be reflecting the reality of the day. So I think there is an impact, and I think PNG should be completely aware of what's going on in the world, understand the dynamics, and try to figure out the best way to respond.
Stay tuned for more discussions on LNG dynamics after the break. Welcome back to the show. We continue with Vivek Chandra as he discusses the diversities in the world energy industry. You painted a very negative picture of the future of coal seam projects in Australia. What makes these projects different from projects in PNG and other places?
And I would like to just clarify that I feel that coal seam methane gas, I've been involved in the coal seam off and on in the business for 20-something years. I lived in Colorado for a long time, which is actually the birthplace of coal seam methane production, because that's where they really got started. I think coal seam methane gas is a very interesting source. It is definitely a real source of gas. I think in the States it produces 8% of the U.S. supply. In Eastern Australia, it produces 25% of the Eastern Australian gas supply today, and it's going to be increasing down the road. The conflict I see is that coal seam methane is very different than conventional gas or even shale gas. Coal seam methane requires a lot of ongoing capital investment by the company. In your PNG LNG project, I would guess, and I don't know this for a fact, but I would guess that 90-something% of the capital expenditure will be done next year. After that, they just have a few ongoing wells, and of course, you got your maintenance and your operational costs along the way. But most of the expenditure has been done the minute the gas starts producing, LNG starts producing. In a coal seam methane LNG project, you have to drill wells on a continuous basis. As you're drilling hundreds and hundreds of wells for the next many, many years, there is a capex requirement. And knowing that I live in Australia, it's amazing to see how inflation in the oil field services is really dramatic. The cost of doing business is very expensive. The cost of capital investments is very expensive. So one of the risks I see in converting coal seam methane into LNG in Australia is that it's hard to predict what the costs of this are going to be. The LNG world, as we talked about earlier, is a long-term supply business. We sign a long-term contract. So on one hand, the customers want a long-term contract, and you as a supplier want a long-term contract. But on the other hand, the supplier has ongoing capital requirements for the next 20 years. It can be a very risky proposition because you have to have a really good idea what your capital costs are going to be. That's kind of, in a general way, why coal seam methane is a difficult thing to put in LNG. I think Australia has an added issue that I feel that the projects that are in place, the coal seam methane projects for LNG are in place, they actually, I think they committed a fatal flaw. And the fatal flaw was they did not want to cooperate. They did not agree to cooperate. The government didn't encourage, or encourage is probably the wrong word, the government didn't make them cooperate. So we have a situation in Gladstone, in Curtis Island, where we have 3 competing projects. Now, competition is always good, we like to say. But at the end of the day, the 3 competing projects are all competing for the same resources. And in the end of the day, does Australia benefit when they are all 3 of them raise the cost of everything else for each other? There's only so many welders in Australia, there's only so many tradespeople in Australia, and they're all competing, the 3 companies are all competing to get the hands on them. Another thing I think, another issue I feel is that they didn't agree to share much infrastructure. And in an LNG project, the infrastructure cost can be enormous. And I feel that we are now just ramping up to that capital expenditure, and we'll see a lot of the cost overrun, some of that to do with infrastructure. I spent a lot of time in the Middle East, where I look at a place like Qatar, where the government encouraged the competing plants to share a common jetty or a common dock, and to share a common tank farm. These things don't, I think, implicitly impact the competitiveness of each project, but they help each project work together. Much like an industrial estate, if Port Moresby has an industrial estate, the government will supply power to everybody. And there could be 2 competing tuna manufacturers, tuna canners, in the same industrial facility, but at least they don't have to worry about buying power or making their own power. They can all get the power from the same source. There's a lot of risk in those coal seam methane projects, and what I'm observing from afar, I don't have any privileged information, is that the costs are dramatically rising. And that we talked about a few minutes ago, I feel that we might be in a situation where LNG prices in the medium to long term could actually go down, and at the best case stay flat. It's a difficult this is a difficult proposition for these companies that have rising costs and try to pass those costs on to their customers, who are then have the opportunity to buy cheaper gas from other suppliers. So a definitely difficult situation. I would like to wish them the best of luck, but I have a feeling that we're going to see a lot more bad news coming out of them. I think the situation, and another big thing that we talked about in the workshop, is the economic impact of natural gas liquids. Natural gas liquids are the components that come out of with normal natural gas streams that are very, very valuable. These are your ethane, propane, butanes, and condensates. Coal seam methane gas has no natural gas liquids, and by its very nature, so you don't have that added advantage. A long time ago, someone told me an anecdote. He said, when you produce coal seam methane gas, you're much like a fisherman. You go out every day, and you might come back with 10 fish, you might come back with 2 fish. You don't really know for sure. And it is a very good business if you can put that fish out in the market and sell the fish. But if someone in the market demands that you have 10 fish every day, you could be in a very difficult situation, because it's very hard to predict how many fish you're going to get every day. While in conventional gas, you have a very good idea what your production is going to be 3, 4, 5 years from now, because you can model it. In coal seam methane, you can't.
Can you explain some of the diversities in the world LNG industry, and why a country like Qatar, the world's biggest LNG producer, can sell its gas for free and still make profits from its LNG projects?
There's a lot of different LNG suppliers out there, and there has been a dramatic increase in LNG capital cost over the last few years. And we have seen a step change from what it used to be to what it is now. If you were lucky enough to start a project a few years ago, your cost base is a lot less now, and you're enjoying the benefits of a low cost base and a high price. So you have the best margins of them all. The Qataris are in that situation. I think the Qataris did many things right, and I have a lot of respect for what they did. They encouraged / forced all the competition companies to work together. They provided the right infrastructure and the right facilities for all the companies to work together. Every company could build their own plant, but the Qatari government made it clear or the order of the plants would be built. They made them all share the same infrastructure, and they made them all pretty much share the same design. So it is all very fungible pieces. There was no new technology to be built, and the workers that worked on them kept on getting better and better at what they do because the same workers built 4 projects. So you didn't have to train a worker to build a one-time PNG LNG, and next week when the construction work is done, he goes back and welds, houses. So the worker was very competent and skilled. Qatar is also very blessed. They have a very large field. It's very close to shore, and it's incredibly rich. It has a lot of NGLs. And the NGLs, again, provide a lot of income, and they're linked to oil prices. So let's be very clear. The Qataris can sell the LNG for free. They do not sell the LNG for free, and they shouldn't sell the LNG for free. But the point is they could if they wanted to because they earn so much money from the NGLs. So the Qataris will not sell it for free, and they shouldn't. And they are encouraging the Asian market to be as competitive as they can because they can come in and make pure profits. So, the world has many diverse suppliers. The world has many diverse buyers. In the end of the day, if you have a gas field that is rich, that is not too far from shore, that is not too far from the LNG plant, that you can then have a cheap cost basis and produce LNG that is competitive with the marketplace, you are in a better situation than someone coming in now. Now, PNG has done an amazing job, PNG LNG, of getting their project on schedule without serious cost overruns so far. And I think they're pretty close to reaching the end where they can do that. A new project coming in has to figure out how to keep its cost basis under control to compete against this very, very competitive market, to compete against the gorillas such as Qatar, who can actually sell it for very, very low cost because they make a lot of money anyway. So I don't know if I answered their question, but that's pretty much, it's a very exciting time because the world LNG is extremely dynamic. In my years, I've never seen so much dynamism in the industry. The price structure is going to change. The price structure will no longer be as oil price linked as it has been in the past. This is causing a lot of angst and distress to the producers who want the oil price link, but unfortunately you can't fight the rising tide. And the rising tide here is the American projects. I'm very optimistic they're going to start exporting a large amounts of LNG. And even if the Asian buyers don't commit to the American projects, they will use that as the competitive stick to force the current producers and the future producers in our region to adopt a more flexible approach, which they have been very reluctant to do, especially in light of their rising capital costs. So the next few years will be really interesting. We got a lot of things to watch. We got to watch what happens to the U.S. projects. We got to watch what happens to the Japanese nuclear industry. We got to see if the Indian and China demand really stays as consistent as it is. We got to see if unconventional, which is shale gas, really happen in other parts of the world like China that people are hoping so, but I'm slightly skeptical. And we really have to watch at the cost basis of these projects that are under construction. PNG LNG, I think, is in a good shape. The other 2 PNG projects that have been talked about, I think, are going to be in a more difficult situation. And the currently construction projects in Australia are in a very difficult position because their costs are rising and they are facing a market that is going to be increasingly competitive. So exciting times for all.
Indeed. Mr. Chandra, thank you very much for your time on the show.
I loved it. I really enjoyed coming to PNG and I hope to come back.
We'll have more after the break. We talked to Max Esperon, Project Director of Moorabbin Mining, and hear how the Golpu project ranks in copper and gold grades with its peers in the Southeast Asian region, and why it will take till 2019 till production can be expected. And we also discuss various other aspects of the Wafi project.
We have Max Esperon, the Project Director of Moorabbin Mining. Welcome, Max.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Golpu is shaping up as one of the most richest copper gold deposits, How would you compare it with Ogtedi Mine or other similar copper gold projects?
We've, in the recent presentation we put together, we did some rankings of Golpu against some of its peers in the Southeast Asian region, looking at both copper and gold grades, and it certainly ranks very high in the Southeast Asian region for large-scale copper gold deposits. So we're very excited about the potential that exists there.
That's great. And what about your Wafi project?
The Wafi deposit itself, we're just completing the study work on that, and we hope to discuss that with the joint ventures later on this year, and then see what decision they make in terms of how to proceed from there.
Max, since you already know a lot about Golpu, why would it take until 2019 before production can be anticipated?
Whilst we know a great deal, we certainly don't know enough, is I guess the simple answer to the question. We have conducted sufficient drilling to inform our pre-feasibility study. And what that has determined is that there is a sustainable commercial and technical basis for its development. But we certainly don't know enough to quantify the capital cost, particularly, and the risks down to that feasibility study level of definition. So that's work that's required to be done in the next few years before we could formally seek endorsement from the board and government to proceed.
Could you also tell us about the cost of development of your project?
Yes, at pre-feasibility level definition, we have an anticipated capital cost of around about $4.8 billion before we get to commercial production.
Okay. And are you facing any challenges in collecting any funds, or?
Well, the funding will be organised by the joint venture partners, obviously, and that's obviously a matter for them to consider how they fund that, either through their internal cash flows or debt financing or whatever. Yeah.
Okay. And Max, what is the possible scale of operation?
It'll certainly be a very large-scale operation. The mine life is going to be something like 25 years and more, hopefully. The scale of operation, it'll be a 25 million tonne per annum operation, and certainly a very large-scale underground operation.
So we should be expecting many people in your company too, like in terms of staffing and human resources.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. It'll be a major employer in the Moorabbin province, that's for sure.
Okay. How do you foresee the environmental impacts for your project?
The mining method that we're recommending is a block underground mine, which has one of the benefits of reducing the amount of material that we need to mine. The nature of the underground mine is that only the ore is extracted, so we don't need to do any cutbacks and remove waste, so to speak. And obviously one of the key considerations for sustainable development going forward is to make sure that we mitigate the impacts from mining, and we're proceeding with the studies to determine how exactly that's going to occur.
Thank you, Max. Thank you for being on our show.
My pleasure.
So this was Max Esperon, Project Director from Moorabbin Mining.
An interview with Hidden Valley Mine, that's next. Stay tuned. Next on the show is Bevan Jones, General Manager of Hidden Valley Mine. We talk about the mine's tailings dam, which is the first and only in PNG, the anticipated production rate at the mine, and a lot more.
Welcome, viewers. Tonight we're joined by Mr. Bevan Jones, who's the General Manager of Hidden Valley Mines. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
So the Hidden Valley Project has paid a great deal of attention to environmental impacts. Can you discuss the cost of building PNG's first tailings dam? And it's the first and only one.
Yes, the terrain at Hidden Valley is very steep, and the actual mine sits about 2,600 metres above sea level. So the challenges associated with building engineered structure to retain the tailings is a significant one. And to do so, we've had to spend, or we will end up spending, in excess of $300 million by the time we're finished.
So how much tailings will be stored in it?
The plan is to store about 25 million tonnes of tailings in that facility.
How safe will it be?
The facility is constructed according to some strict engineering guidelines. We have a third-party group that that monitors the work that we do, that makes sure that we adhere to those engineering controls and that we build the dam in the right order and have the levels completed at the right time to ensure its safety. The design takes into consideration the steeply dipping land in that area, the mountainous conditions, as well as seismic and environmental conditions that occur in that area as well.
Well, Hidden Valley Mines produced 177,000 ounces of gold last year, but you're aiming to reach 250,000 ounces of gold. What are the challenges we're actually trying to get there?
Okay, so the Hidden Valley Mine is one of the newer mines in PNG and was only constructed and commissioned in 2010. So it's only really been in full operation for 2 years. We are working in a relatively difficult place to work, and we are trying to engage the local communities and the workforce from those particular areas. So we have a lot of work to do associated with training our people to get them to the standard that's required to reach the 250,000 ounces. So at the moment we have the issues associated with getting the workforce to the right level, but we have also some infrastructure style issues which have been causing us some concern, and we have been put in place some projects to get the capacity up. So the mill is currently rated at 4.2 million tonnes per annum, and we've got a program in place to bring that capacity up to 4.7 million tonnes. This year alone we'll be spending 130 million kina to improve that, and there's a raft of changes to the processing plant to enable that to occur. On top of that, we're also doing a lot of work on the overland pipe conveyor to the order of about 40 million Australian dollars to upgrade that and put a new crusher in place to make sure that we can get that 250,000 ounces. We're also spending approximately $30 million this year on additional plant to work in the mine, so mining fleet. 4 new excavators, 6 trucks of the 100-tonne category. Also another 20 smaller trucks, the articulated dump trucks, to assist us with our infrastructure work that we're doing, so the tailings dam build, plus also the waste dump construction, which is very challenging in this area as well. So this year we're spending about $130 million on additional capital projects. 130 million kina of that is specifically on the process plant, but there is a number of infrastructure projects on foot, and once they're all implemented, we should see us pushing the 250,000 ounces mark.
All right. Well, you mentioned there's a lot of development in terms of work. That means you need a lot of people. Currently, yes. How many people do you have at the mines, and how much are we looking at now if you're trying to aim for 250,000 ounces? Well,
we currently have probably enough people in terms of numbers on site to get to 250,000 ounces. So we have approximately 1,800 of our own direct employees, and we have about 2,200 contractors that come in at various times to assist us in that work. The Hidden Valley Mine is separated from Lae, which is the nearest port, by 120 kilometres of road in relatively poor condition. So a lot of our contractors are associated with moving materials from materials and people, because all of our people, our workforce come. Well, a large percentage of them come through Lae, even if they don't live in Lae. So there's buses and trucks and stuff like that. So that's where a lot of our contractors are taken up on site. We do have some earthworks contractors, our caterers, and some of our landowner group have got some labour hire companies. So we have a diverse spread of people working for us at Hidden Valley, and we've probably, in terms of numbers, we're going to see a little bit of a peak towards this quarter. For the construction of the new the new crusher, and then we should see, I guess, a fairly static sort of arrangement.
We'll have more after the break. In this last segment, as we continue with Bevan Jones, we find out about the effectiveness of the pipe conveyor technology that the mine uses and the risks, costs and challenges involved in its operation.
And I understand there's a 4.5 kilometre pipe conveyor
That's
that you have
correct,
to use.
yep.
How does that compare to a road and trucking system, concerning like the roads up there are not as good as you'd want them to be?
Yes, no. Well, the pipe conveyor is a relatively new technology, and it's the first time it's been used in Papua New Guinea. It's a relatively simple concept that hasn't always gone to plan at Hidden Valley, and as a result, we've been constantly trying to improve the process. The process plant is about 500 metres below the Hidden Valley mine, so once the material is crushed, it needs to be transported down quite steep roadways or down the pipe conveyor. So the pipe conveyor solves quite a lot of issues as long as it's working fine. So it goes down very steep grades, and the material, because it closes over, it starts off flat. It looks like a normal conveyor, gets loaded in the normal standard manner, but just as it leaves, the rollers actually close the conveyor, and so it ends up looking like a pipe. So that conveyor has the ability to move the material down very steep sloping, which a standard conveyor would not be able to do. So the technology and I guess the concept is relatively new, and so we're working through that. In the meantime, we already do truck some of that material down, and the biggest single issue with the trucking, or there's a couple of issues, but the safety concerns. It's hazardous having numerous trucks, something, to move that material. We're talking probably 30 trucks on quite steep haul roads in very wet conditions, wet and slippery conditions. So every time you have to rely on trucking to move the material, there's a chance that there could be some incident. Obviously, we are very vigilant and putting systems in place and procedures and rules and training to make sure that their operators know what they're doing. But you've got 30 people, 30 trucks running up and down quite a busy haul road. So that's the first concern, safety. So the overland conveyor takes away some of that risk. The second one is cost. The pipe conveyor costs us about $7 kina a tonne to transport that material, whereas the trucking is in excess of 22 kina a tonne. So there's a huge cost benefit to being able to use the pipe conveyor. So or the overland conveyor. So we're very focused at getting a better result. The crusher upgrade that we're doing, that should be completed in the first quarter of 2013, will address the issues that we've seen to date with the material size going onto that conveyor. At the same time, we're also spending a lot of time and effort, and the person who designed that and the team that designed that have been involved in coming up with some innovative solutions to make the performance of that machine better, including, there's a lot of technical, electronic programming that goes into ensuring that the tensions are correct on the belt. Plus, there's also some physical things like larger rollers, and we need to replace some of the belt as well. So, all in all, we're very hopeful that by the end of the next quarter, we'll see a much improved result from that, and then we'll have a situation where we won't need the trucks to operate, and we'll save a lot of money.
So it seems like every other mine and every other petroleum or gas project in Papua New Guinea, wherever this establishment happens in the middle of our rural areas, you become like the government. You supply a lot of things. I've seen a lot of work that the Moorabbin Mining joint venture has done. Are you able to talk to us about the community projects that you've got going around the area that you work?
Well, obviously, yes. Look, as soon as a mining organisation starts up, people look to it for all sorts of things. Some of the expectations are unrealistic. In general, but we've been very happy to assist the landowner groups that because without the landowner groups we don't have a project. So it's very important that we work together. So, you know, we've focused generally on areas that will help improve people's lives. So starting with education. The landowner villages that surround both our operations at Hidden Valley and at Wafi, we've done a lot of work to assist the education. So we've helped with supplying funds for people so that they can attend the school. We've also built classrooms and teachers' residence. We supply or we pay the salaries of teachers, and we also supply necessary infrastructure type and goods so the school can work. So, you know, educational materials and pens and paper, it's stationery type stuff. So we've sort of focused on making sure that the people of the Moorabbin province that are particularly affected by our operations get the start in life that they need to get ahead. So that's very important to us. In terms of health and education, we've set up community aid posts in the areas affected, and including supplies, medicines and stuff like that. Education to people about, you know, the common communicable diseases and, you know, malaria and stuff like that in the area, and some of that kind of stuff. So in general, we look after the health of the people in our immediate influence. We have also been involved in other programs to ensure that people have access to good drinking water. Okay. And we've put in place infrastructure and systems to ensure that these landowner villages have permanent water sources.
Mr. Jones, it was a pleasure talking to you about what Hidden Valley Mines do.
Okay, thank you very much.
That was Mr. Bevan Jones, the General Manager of Hidden Valley Mines.
That ends another edition of Resource PNG. For any comments or queries, do email us on this address, resourcepng@mtv.com.pg. Or to find out more, check MTV online, that's www.mtv.com.pg, and go to our Resource PNG page. Until another edition of Resource PNG, have a pleasant evening.